adoption of the minutes from January 11th, 2023. Are there any corrections? Seeing none, the minutes are approved as presented. Today is a first hearing, we'll have another one on Tuesday, of the language of Senate File 15, Senator Putnam's bill on full Social Security benefit subtraction, and also the public pension benefits subtraction. And we will have Senator Putnam will present the bill, and we may have additional information provided by Senate Counsel. So Senator Putnam. So we have Senate File 15 before us. The way we're going to proceed is presentation of the bill. Any kind of questions that members have, either Senator Putnam or of Senate Counsel or Fiscal, and there'll be no action taken on the bill. We will have testimony, and the bill will be laid over at whenever that testimony is completed on Tuesday, assuming that we will not need more than one hearing for it. So today is information. It's not an informational hearing. This is a real hearing on this bill. But what we really need to have a lot of information, accurate information, and dispelling disinformation as much as we can, like the notion that our current system is a double taxation one that is so far from what is the actual case that we hope nobody brings that up. So we have Senate File 15 in front of us. Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about an issue that's incredibly important to all Minnesotans. I think there's a really good chance that if you've gone out to coffee or breakfast in the last couple of years, you've overheard people talking about this issue. And those of us who have run for office have visited with people at their doors talking about this issue. And we've answered their questions. We've taken a stand. We've made promises. This is our opportunity to make that stand real and to keep the promises that we made. That's important to me, and I think it is to you all as well. Now, as Senator Rest, as Madam Chair intimated, there's a tremendous amount of misinformation out there about this issue. We've heard that every single senior in the state of Minnesota is going to move to Florida if we don't do something about this. And we've also heard on the other side that the state's going to go bankrupt and we're not going to have schools if we get rid of this tax. Neither of those things is true, not even remotely. That's not how the math works out. But to me, we got a bigger issue here. It's an issue of respect, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. Now, here's the thing. I'm no expert in tax law, and I'm too honest and my collar is too blue to pretend like I am. My goal this morning is simply to present a reasonable, rational argument in favor of this policy change. Accordingly, I will proceed by making clear what we're talking about, what the bill is, where it comes from, and then I'll explain who it impacts and why it's a good idea. Now, the bill before you is pretty simple. This bill will eliminate 100% of the tax on Social Security benefits. It will also reform taxes on pension income of those who have not been eligible to participate in the Social Security system. We're talking about police officers, state troopers, firefighters, some teachers. That's what we're talking about. Now, it's important to realize that Social Security benefits haven't always been taxed. Two Treasury Department rulings in 1938 and another in 1941 established that Social Security benefits were not taxable. It wasn't until 1984 when Ronald Reagan oversaw the creation of a tax on Social Security benefits. The basic rule that he put in place was that up to 50% of Social Security benefits could be added to taxable income if the taxpayer's total income exceeded certain thresholds. Now, part of the argument, this is very important, part of the argument in 1983 was about equity, that we have to tax Social Security benefits because we tax pension benefits. It's important for us to acknowledge at the outset that historically, pensions and Social Security are inextricable. They also do the same thing. Now, in 1993, legislation was enacted that essentially increased the tax put in place under the 1983 law. It raised from 50% to 85% the portion of Social Security benefits subject to taxation. Now, this change was means tested. It only affected the higher income beneficiaries. Beneficiaries of modest incomes might still be subject to the 50% rate or no taxation at all, depending on the overall taxable income. So members, let's be perfectly clear. Reagan created this tax. Bill Clinton made it worse. This is not a partisan issue. It hasn't been, and it shouldn't be today. It's also not exclusively a Minnesota issue. 30 states do not tax Social Security benefits. 12 tax all or some of those benefits. Utah is the only state that simply conforms to federal law. 7 others don't tax Social Security, but that's because they have no income tax at all. But one of them is Florida, so whatever. In Minnesota, it's pretty complicated to figure out who actually pays this tax. About 473,000 tax returns would be affected by the expanded Social Security subtraction in tax year 2023, the bill that we're talking about. The average decrease in tax from the expanded Social Security subtraction would be $1,276. Of that number, almost 250,000 of these tax returns are people with a federal adjusted gross income of less than $100,000. Now, I know what some of us are thinking. That means a lot of rich people are going to get this benefit. Let's be grown-ups rather than partisans and admit that that is true. Now, I'm not a fan of this benefit going to the super rich, but we cannot let a modest benefit for the wealthy make us throw out the middle-class baby with the wealthy bathwater. Sure, the rich will get a little bit, but beyond the numbers, this change will be felt more profoundly by our friends in the middle class. But also, members, don't forget that we have about 30,000 Minnesotans who would be affected by this change who aren't in their late 60s. We could be talking about someone younger than 62 who retired early. But we could also be talking about a 50-year-old living with a disability. We could be talking about a surviving spouse. We could be talking about a dependent child. I can't tell you how many of each of these kinds of folks would be impacted, but I can tell you they're all Minnesotans, and they all deserve our respect. Now, the second half of this bill deals with pension income for those who have not been able to participate in the Social Security program. About 48,200 taxpayers would be affected in tax year 2023 by the public pension subtraction. The average decrease in tax from the pension subtraction would be $833. These folks are neighbors who weren't able to participate in Social Security because of the promise of their pension. We're talking about firefighters, state troopers, and some teachers. These are folks who showed up to work for years, who served our communities. They did their time. I'm sure they would like that additional $800. But I also think they would welcome the appreciation we'd be showing them if we stop taxing what they've earned through lifetimes of serving our communities. So I said I was going to talk about respect today. I don't believe that a senior who makes $500,000 a year is going to leave the state because they paid $2,500 in taxes. The implication that our seniors are that greedy is really troubling to me. So I suppose that works as a partisan talking point, but it doesn't make much sense if you really think about it. But they might leave because they feel their labor and their time aren't being respected. Madam Chair, members, this bill is about money. But it's also about what, and more importantly, whom we value. Now, when I first got in politics a couple years ago, I met a guy named Robert. I called him on the phone, cold call. And he told me his number one issue was elimination of this tax. This is 5-6 years ago, before this issue was treated as a political football that everybody wanted to spike. I didn't know a whole lot about it. He'd worked in manufacturing for his whole life, something like 45 years. He wasn't indigent. He could afford his most basic needs, but his house value kept increasing, and so did his property taxes. And that made him worry. That's my concern. It made him worry. I talked to him again this year. He's now economizing in ways he never thought he'd have to, stretching his pennies. He has a place to live. He's not in danger of losing his house. But he has stress and anxiety that he never thought he was going to have. He didn't think he was going to have to worry when he retired. But now he does. Robert deserves not to worry. We all deserve to feel respect for the work we've done and the time we've put in. Members, here's our chance to show our respect to those who came before us, to honor the work of those who have served us. I ask for your support for this bill, and I'm open to questions.
Senator Putnam, are you going to go through the bill for us?
I did a brief summary of it initially, Madam Chair, but I'll just say in the simplest sense, what it does is
the custom is to go through it section by section so that we'll know what's being referred to.
Oh.
If you can do that on your own, otherwise we can ask Senate Counsel to do that.
Certainly, Madam Chair. The first section, Section 1, refers to Social Security benefits specifically, and it exempts Social Security income from state taxation. The second portion of the bill, Section 2, deals to do with the public pension income subtraction. And what that does basically is it treats public pensions of state employees who are not eligible for Social Security as we would be treating individuals who are actually taking Social Security.
Senator Putnam, I would also direct members' attention to the revenue estimate. The amount of tax relief that's given for that part of the bill is about $40 million a year. The bulk of this bill is indeed in Social Security.
Yes, Madam Chair, is it, I think in the revenue statement that members most likely have seen, the overall bill for this bill is somewhere around $600 to $700 million a year. The pension portion is around $40 million, and the Social Security number is varies over the next 4 years, but it is typically around $600 million.
So in Section 2, what we know what it costs, $40 million. What is the mechanism or the formula used to determine that subtraction?
Of the public pension income, Madam Chair? I might defer to counsel on that for the very specific details of that, if that's adequate.
Ms. Pollock?
I apologize, Madam Chair, but I don't want to make a mistake.
Well, thank you for that. Ms. Pollock?
Madam Chair and members, the calculation of the public pension subtraction is based nearly exactly on the calculation of the amount of Social Security income that is taxable at the federal level. So there are 3 tiers essentially. So the first $25,000 would not be taxed, and then the second tier goes $25,000 for a single filer, $32,000 for married joint filers, and then the other 2 tiers would be exactly the same as the Social Security taxation structure. So the first tier, up to 50% would be excluded from tax, and that's for income for single filers of $25,000 to $34,000, and married joint filers $32,000 to $44,000. And then in the third tier, 15% would be excluded from tax for single filers with income up to $34,000 or greater, and $44,000 or greater for married joint filers. The formula is exactly the same as the way that Social Security taxation is structured at the federal level.
So, Ms. Pollock, what's the relationship of when a person is receiving both Social Security income and other pension income on which their earnings were subject to Social Security.
Madam Chair, are you asking under this bill, what would be the?
Sure.
Sure, okay. So first, the public pension subtraction is only available for recipients of certain pensions that are enumerated here under Minnesota statutes for work in which they did not, for which they did not also receive Social Security benefits. So
So is it possible then that you'd get a break on taxation on your pension income, non-Social Security, and then have whatever Social Security income you receive be totally exempt? Is that correct? Or is there a relationship between the two?
Madam Chair, if there were a recipient who, for example, received qualifying public pension income, they would receive the partial pension subtraction, partial subtraction of that public pension income under this bill. If, for example, they qualified for Social Security under other employment, they would also be eligible for, under this bill, a full subtraction of the taxable Social Security benefits.
So it is not coordinated like legislators who will get Social Security and also get their legislative pension and have the overall amount be reduced.
Madam Chair, for certain legislators who did not opt into the defined contribution plan, I think these are legislators that were elected before 1997 who did not opt into the defined contribution plan, those legislators would be eligible for the public pension subtraction because they did not those that service was not eligible for, or not, Social Security was not part of that pension plan.
And so when those legislators, I'm only using them as a group that are subject to both.
Okay.
So they, that coordinated benefit is in place for those who are covered by a defined benefit plan. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair.
But not for those under the defined contribution plan. And after 1997, is it the case that all legislators are covered by the defined contribution and not the defined benefit plan?
Madam Chair, I am not sure about that. I'm not sure the options that are available to legislators. I'm aware of staff, but
Sure, okay. Well,
but I don't know if there's another
we
system
are
that's
talking
specific
about-
to legislators.
We are talking about, what is the total benefit that an individual will have, and I'll get to you in a minute, Senator Disick, and to understand the relationship between those two programs, I think, will lead us to understand why the amount in the revenue estimate is so large. Senator Disick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to mention so you have this group of public employees who their plans are not coordinated with Social Security, so they did not get Social Security. So you have police, fire, teachers, some other municipal employees that they do not qualify for Social Security. If they get another job, either after leaving their public safety job, or if they worked part-time while in public safety, their pension or their Social Security gets deducted. So there's an interaction there.
Yes.
So they don't get, they don't get the full amount. If like I had part-time jobs, worked a full-time job and had a part-time job, they didn't deduct part of my Social Security that I got from the part-time job from the full-time job, where if you have a full-time and you're in this non-coordinated plan and you have a part-time job, one of those two gets deducted, and I don't remember which one, but there's an interaction there, and one of them, they get less amount. So this isn't so they will probably get then if we pass the repeal of or the exemption of the taxes on the Social Security, they will get that. But again, they're getting so much less Social Security anyway because of that interaction. So, and a lot of the people in this plan are, in a chunk of them are elderly women, and they're the widows, and they are usually getting, around 30 to 35,000, I believe when I last checked last year, the average. So this is not, huge pensions. It is, they're living off of it, but it is if we're going to remove the exemption on one, we should look at this group that does not qualify for Social Security to just have a fairness. It's a fairness issue in my mind.
Right.
Thank you.
I really think that's, interesting points to make. And and with regard to teachers, it's not all teachers, obviously, because at some point, teachers, what is it, post 69 teachers. Beg pardon? 78. Post 7. Yes. The only reason I said that is because when I started teaching in 1970, I had to pay Social Security. I was not exempted from that. But those folks, anybody that started teaching after 78, then there was not an option to refuse to pay into Social Security and pay only into the pension plan. And of course, when we talk about those things too, we're not the only ones, employees are not the only ones that are paying. The Social Security tax is paid half by your employer, and it's not paid 100% by any means by any employee at any level. And I intend by raising these issues to expose just how complicated this system is in terms of how much you get, how much you don't get. Social Security, it's a misnomer to call it a fixed income. It changes every year. It's not a fixed income, and I don't remember that it's ever gone down. Maybe stayed the same, but never gone down. And I think as we are discussing this, that we make a real attempt to understand the complexity of a system like this, and maybe question why they made it so difficult to understand. But when we take up this language, we have to know what it means. And so we're gonna be in the weeds on this bill and others that deal with the pension income and/or the Social Security income. Senator Jaskowski? Or, I'm sorry, Senator Dietzig, important point, but did you have any further thing? Okay, Senator Jaskowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for hearing this bill.
Sure.
Thank you, Senator Putnam, for bringing the bill forward and for your great presentation of it. Madam Chair, I'm wondering, I remember from discussion of this issue in past tax committee somewhere else, Madam Chair, that
The other place.
other places, that I remember the interaction. I'm wondering if Ms. Pollack can help us understand. I remember the way that this Social Security income tax is structured in Minnesota, that seniors receiving Social Security income were disincentivized from work outside of the Social Security income by the mere structure of the taxation that we place upon both of them. And I'm wondering if Ms. Pollack could help us review that. I remember that a senior that works more outside of Social Security would end up with higher taxation on their Social Security benefits because of that work and because of that income. Is that true? Is that
We'll
a
ask
proper?
her that,
Yeah, is that a
Senator
proper?
Jaskowski, but I think also it's that whole issue that Senator Dietzig was bringing up of the coordination. When you're paying into two separate systems, and then when you get your Social Security benefit, if you're a public employee, it's reduced because of that. And I don't know if your question is about, how about forget the public employee part, but just anybody receiving Social Security?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
If there's a
Yeah, that was
disincentive of
to
still
work.
being in the workforce.
Yes.
Madam Chair, Senator Drazkowski, I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, someone can't receive Social Security benefits while they're still earning wages. I guess, could you restate the question? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. If it's only pertaining to Social Security, and we're putting aside the public pension issue for a moment, as Senator Rest indicated.
So, Madam Chair and Ms. Pollack, so a senior cannot work cannot work at all when they're earning Social Security and earn income, or their Social Security is turned off? Is that what you're saying?
That's not the case, Senator
Yeah,
Drazkowski.
I didn't think so.
There certainly are certain categories of Social Security benefits recipients who receive that Social Security income or benefit independent of their employment status. There's Social Security income received by people on disability, for example, but they can still work. Depending how you understand and the choices that you make within the system, there are other taxpayers who receive Social Security, widows, for example, whose employment outside of receiving their Social Security benefits does not diminish their Social Security receipts at all. It's independent of it.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to hold up the committee discussion, but maybe I'll go back into the workshop and try to review what I heard in another place some long time ago.
Well, because of the questions that are coming up, I wonder also if it'd be possible for us to, because I really do think it's important to understand where these benefits are coming. And, I support, I'm 100% for 100%, but I certainly want to understand where that's coming from. And I just wonder, Senator Putnam, and we can go through the rest of this as well, but if we might not ask somebody from the Social Security Administration to come and, if we can, and make a presentation. And if obviously it's not today, maybe it won't even be on Tuesday. But I think that's important information, and that the details of which we should understand.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Senator Putnam.
respond to that briefly. I want to appreciate the committee's understanding of the Byzantine nature of this issue and how incredibly complicated it is. My understanding, Senator Drazkowski, is that the bulk of the income we're talking about is largely investment income. As part of the big calculation of this, which is one of the things that makes it so difficult in trying to identify who is truly getting the benefit in terms of their income level. So remember the 30,000 people I mentioned who weren't 65 or older, but who were collecting this benefit. That could be someone with a really good tax lawyer who's able to deduct all kinds of things and only show $1,000 on their federal adjusted gross income. Or it could be someone who is legitimately indigent. And we just don't have the capacity to really identify those things, partially because of the complexity of this, but also because so much of the income we're talking about is investment income. At least that's my understanding.
Senator Nelson.
Well, I think
Or-
you,
Senator Nelson.
well, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to a brief example of what I think Senator Drazkowski was mentioning about the disincentive. And I will tell you about my mother, a retired teacher. They needed substitute teachers. They asked her to come back. Special education substitute teachers are hard to find. She did. And after a bit of time, my father, and I'm sure their financial advisors, just said, you know, Dolores, you really just can't continue this substitute teaching because the amount of money that you're getting, we are actually in a higher bracket, and it's affecting our retirement. And of course, that was very painful for my mom to hear that, because she really did want to teach and continue substitute teaching. And I do recall she went to the principal and said, well, you know what, I'll just substitute teach and you don't have to pay me. Well, you know how that's not possible.
No, right.
But I would say, so there is a disincentive. There is a disincentive, particularly at a time where we have a workforce shortage. We want to encourage our retirees to stay in the workforce as long as they would like. And we ought not be penalizing their earned Social Security income by, now this is our current law in Minnesota, how we, you know, just eliminate certain people from Social Security taxation. So that is the example that I, not that I heard it, but that my family experienced it.
Sure, Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Nelson. I think it's coming back. The cobwebs are being erased by your recollection, so thank you. Yeah, it was an interaction between work and reduced Social Security benefits because of that work. I think there was some sort of interaction there. Thank you.
Senator Weber, thank you. This is a difficult conversation to have because there's so much information that we need to contribute to one another. Senator
The one thing we need to remember, Madam Chair, is that there were some changes in federal tax law. There was a time when if you took Social Security at the early retirement, 62 for example, you would be penalized. The amount of your Social Security would be reduced if you earned over a certain amount. Today, you can get to full retirement, and that full retirement varies for people. The younger you are, the farther you have to live to get to full retirement. For me, I had to be 66 and 4 months, 66 years and 4 months, which I hit last summer. And so I can go ahead and take Social Security and earn whatever I wish without any penalty to my Social Security payment. So that, at the time your mother retired, Senator Nelson, that would probably, I don't think that capability existed at that point. But they did modify those rules as relates to Social Security income. And so it probably, in terms of costing you to continue to work, I don't think it's as big a factor today as it was at a previous time.
Also, the understanding how that benefit is calculated too. I mean, pensions, defined benefit pensions for the most part are a calculation based on high 5 years of salary for the highest 5 years salary income determines your benefit. And so if you started out at $10,000 a year salary for a teacher and you ended up the last 5 years were over $50,000, then the benefit is based on the highest 5 years of your earnings life. Whereas in Social Security, the benefit, and I keep getting this number of years wrong, but it's either 30 or 35 years of earnings, including those years in which you paid, which you didn't work at all. It's still a year that's the first year to the, let's say, the 35th year is how the calculation is done. And it used to be that we would get a report from the Social Security Administration showing every single year in which we had Social Security incomes. And then a calculated benefit based on how old you were in terms of eligibility, how much you were going to receive. I don't think we get that report of earnings anymore. I would imagine you can go on the Social Security Administration's website and put in your Social Security number and whatever other required identification there might be to determine that, to get that same kind of information. But we don't get it anymore, although perhaps you get it until you retire. It still might be going out to some taxpayers and working folks, but not going out to people that are already eligible. So they're, and are within that 30 to 35 years, because that is fixed. So it's another complication, as I understand it, of the determination of your benefit. And then after that, it becomes a little bit simpler, as far as I understand, because if you get this much in this year, they calculated the CPIW, which is the Consumer Price Index. The W stands for workers, and it is for those, it's a calculation of a consumer price index. It's based on those who are actively employed. And it's not a determinative factor, as I understand it, but it is an informational factor that then the Social Security Administration sends you a letter and says, this is how much you're going to get next year. And some years, and of course, I'm speaking as a Social Security recipient, some years it's nothing because that CPIW was flat. This year, it's a big jump, 7%, 8%. And that goes to everybody based on your benefit that you're receiving right now. And if you're receiving the max, which is what, something like $40,000, I think is the maximum, 40, 45, maybe Senator Weber knows that amount. But the people that are getting $40,000, $45,000 a year, they get the same inflation jump as those that their Social Security income is like $20,000. And I do think we should have, Ms. Pollack, what the average Social Security recipient in Minnesota is what? Or Senator Putnam, what is the average? What is the average amount of Social Security that is received in Minnesota?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Pollack taught me that yesterday, so I think you did. So I'd like to defer to her on this one too, so I don't get the numbers imprecise. But I believe it's in that same sort of territory.
Ms. Pollack?
Madam Chair, Senator Putnam, I believe Mr. Arneson might have that information.
Mr. Arneson? And I see, as he's coming forward, in a brief provided to some of us, that the maximum credit for married filing joint is $5,450 for, and then phasing out at $82,770.
Madam Chair, Mr. Arneson provided me with a response to
Okay,
that.
go right ahead. Thank you, Ms. Pollack.
Madam Chair, the average benefit in 2020 was about 19,500.
Okay? So close enough to 20, which was when I thought it was. We have taken up this issue before, and we have seldom gone into these nitty-gritty details. And I certainly confess I don't understand every factor that is wound into the Social Security benefits and taxes paid. And, but I feel like it's very difficult to unwind it. And we may decide at some point that there's a policy that is, the overall policy is more important than unwinding every single detail. So I think we can forgive ourselves for that. Senator Nelson, do you have further comment?
Yes, well, Madam Chair, thank you for this really in-depth review. It is critical, and we, like you said, we might not get to every detail. But the one thing I would note is regarding those public pensions, these pensions do not get the type of COLA increase that Social Security does. It is under 2%. I believe these folks are like 1.25%. So just want to make sure that's on the record. Thank you.
Right, so Social Security people this year are getting what? It was not that 8% number that was touted at the end of the year before the Social Security determination was made. I think then it was like 8%, and I think the Social Security benefit went up like 7.6%. So it was lower than that, but that is still 3-4 times what some pensioners whose income throughout their working life was not subject to Social Security. And I've also heard from, and I'm sure you have too, we think locally here, those teachers, firefighters, other public employees that are state employees, but I've also heard from the federal railway workers that they don't pay Social Security either, and their pensions are independent of, their pension income is independent of Social Security, although they also may have other jobs in which they are required to pay into to Social Security.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Sure, go right ahead.
Thank you, Senator Nelson, for your comment. And I think that this is a really essential dimension of our discussion today, is understanding the practical and the moral relationship between the pension question and the Social Security issue. We're all talking about Social Security. That's got a lot of heat, a lot of noise around the Social Security issue. But my contention today is that the pension issue, the public pension issue, is inextricable from that conversation. It's not just an issue of fairness, though it absolutely is. It's also just simple rationality. So I would ask members to, as we try to unravel the question of Social Security, that we ravel it up with the pension concern.
Mm-hmm. Senator Weber?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the bill itself, I just wish to say that for the pensions that are covered by this bill, I have no argument with including them with the Social Security exclusion. And I really have no problem with the bill itself. I take issue with some of your introductory comments, Senator Putnam, and I won't go into that today. We'll save that for a floor discussion someday. But I think that the one thing we do have to remember is that for those individuals who look at where their state of domicile is going to be, it isn't just a question of Social Security, it's a question of our rates as well. If you look at the overall tax structure across this country, we are right up there with the best of them. And so, as we look at not only Social Security income, but we look at our income tax rates, it's the combination of a variety of things that leads people to say, I will not live in the state of Minnesota for 6 months and 1 day because they have declared their domicile elsewhere. And from a financial aspect, you know, there was a time if you retired with a $50,000, $60,000 income, you were thought to be wealthy. Today, you know, by the time you pay all the bills that come in, you really don't have a lot left. And I think that our tax code has certainly not kept up with the expenses that our people face in the state of Minnesota. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Madam Chair, if I may respond?
Go right ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Weber, I appreciate your point, and I actually agree with you. So to clarify my point, my issue was about the public discourse around this concern that is removing those other variables and suggesting that this is the only reason why seniors are feeling overtaxed in the state of Minnesota. That was the point that I was attempting to make, is that there is an argument that's out there that's saying this is the only tax, it's the only issue, it's the only reason people are leaving. I don't think that's true. So I do agree with you that it's part of a larger patchwork of taxation and concerns that might be influencing people to leave the state. But I don't believe, as we hear in public discourse quite frequently, that Social Security tax is the only reason that people are leaving the state. And I appreciate your much more nuanced understanding of it that appreciates those other kind of taxes as part of a matrix of disincentivization.
Senator Hellstrow.
Thank you, Chair Rest, and Senator Putnam, thank you for your leadership on this legislation. As you know, I have also spoken out actively on this piece of important legislation that we're looking forward to doing this session. My district leans older than the average district. And part of the reason is because people want to live in my district. And that's in particular concern for seniors who want to retire up on the North Shore, who want to retire near some of the most beautiful public lands that we have in our state. I heard ad nauseum from seniors and those nearing retirement how critical this issue was. With correspondence from my constituents since the election, I would say 90%, that's an estimation, but about 90% have told me how important this issue is. And so I think it's also, that said, really critical that we dive in. Clearly from this discussion, it shows that this is complex, that there's a lot of factors to consider, that we need to include those on public pensions, that we can't just do a strict Social Security exemption. So I'm really excited to dive further into this bill and continue to advocate for it in our caucus. Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to talk about this more now, or do we need to look at our documents and get a better understanding of what the bill does, and also what the interactions are that we're attempting to do away with? And of course, you know, we started in 2017 when we had a bill like this. Well, I don't think it included public employees part of this, but a bill to exclude Social Security benefits from taxation regardless of your income level elsewhere. And we settled on a measure that every year, it's all, you know, everything is adjusted, so they're avoiding bracket creep anyway, but then an increased percentage of your Social Security benefits since 2017 have been exempt anyway. But the impact, I would say, probably for most recipients is unnoticeable. I mean, it happens. You get it. You know, you get your W-2, and that information is reflected there. But it's not meaningful. When it gets transferred onto your tax return, that number is not it's automatically calculated when you're filing, when you're getting down to determining adjusted gross income. I think a simpler concepts to talk about are things that are specifically Minnesota practices. And that is, and we'll see this, and we heard about it yesterday in a discussion of the term household income and where it is used to calculate how much of a credit or what other kind of benefit is there. And Social Security income, that part of it is non-taxable, and if none of it is taxable, it way jumps back into the definition of household income and affects your eligibility or the level of eligibility for the renter's credit and for the property tax refund for homeowners. And that renter's credit proposal, and I think it's in the education credit as well, non-taxable income is not added back in to your income to determine how much of a benefit under either one of those programs, education credit, M1PR, renter's credit, is actually going to make a difference. And I certainly have gotten that complaint from people who are grateful because they don't pay taxes on their Social Security income at all. They're part of the 55%. But then when they look at what they have, what income level they have to put down on their M1PR, all of a sudden it makes them look like they're affluent in some way because they added back on, $30,000 in or maybe even less, maybe that $20,000, that's the average. And they consider that being penalized for their non-taxable income, but it's not municipal interest. It's not these grand programs for people that, and I don't mean that pejoratively, actually. There's some people that didn't get Social Security, and what they do is invest savings into municipal bonds on which they don't pay Social Security. I'm sorry, on which they don't pay income taxes. And so that was their nest egg because they didn't have this nest egg of Social Security or even maybe a pension source from other working situations. So we tried once to have a bill that taxed municipal interest, and that lasted all of 30 seconds before all the bond houses just descended on Minnesota legislators, saying, not only did you hurt your rating by even bringing the bill up or introducing it, and it wasn't helped that you had the bill returned to author, even got it off the record. Representative Rest at the time, and I vowed never again I'm going to do that. But it's the same kind of argument, but for a different group of taxpayers. And the people that live off of municipal interest, for example, probably don't qualify for the renter's credit or even the property tax refund, even though Senator Klein and others are still working toward making the special property tax refund, lowering that percentage from 12% to 10% so that you get something independent of your income as well as the regular property tax refund that is related to and is progressive, is related to your level of income. So I'm someone who could stay here another hour and talk about this, but I'm not so sure it's a benefit for the rest of you unless you want to continue. Senator Housechildt. I'm sorry, Senator Drazkowski, I didn't look quick enough.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was in the workshop and listening to you at the same time. But I did find a document from that other body over there. I think it was the one we were looking at in committee. It was February of 2020. It's Minnesota's taxation of Social Security income. It's a 2-page document. And it includes the different tiers that Ms. Pollack was talking about. So if your provisional income as a, I'm just going to use single filer, is $25,000 or less, 100% of your Social Security income is excluded from taxation.
Right.
If your single filer's provisional income in the tier 1 is $25,000 to $34,000, half of your Social Security income can be excluded from taxation. If your income, and they call it tier 2 here, is $34,000 or greater, your provisional income is $34,000 or greater, 15% of your Social Security income can be excluded from taxation. So that is the dynamic that I was remembering, Madam Chair.
I see. And the, at the federal level, it is that 85-15, but Minnesota, since 2017, has been gradually increasing from that 15%, maybe minimally, but it has been an increasing subtraction. And once again, just because your Social Security income is not taxed doesn't mean you're going to get out from under taxation of other income, even if it's earned income. So thanks for bringing up that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But of course, my point that I'm trying to arrive at here is that the more income you make, the higher the taxation on your Social Security income.
Exactly, yes. Even though we've tried to improve that for the last 5 years.
So you're disincentivized from working or earning outside income, I should
That
say.
more of your Social Security income in Minnesota, regardless of, more of your Social Security income in Minnesota, based on a progressive formula, ends up being exempt from taxation. So for individual taxpayers, it's not just going to be 15% across the board. It's even going to have a bump above that for income levels that are higher than that, even though it's not going to be 100%. I don't know if that's, did I explain that correctly, Ms. Pollack?
Madam Chair, yes, I think so. I mean, the way that it would work for Minnesota taxpayers is that, right, for state taxation purposes, the amount of your Social Security income that's subject to taxation is going to be larger than those, the tiers that.
At the federal level.
At the federal level,
Yes.
correct, that
That's an easier way.
Senator Drazkowski referenced.
Okay. Anything else we should bring up today? Please try and get as much information about it, and maybe having either someone from the Social Security Administration, or I think it's maybe easier for us to think about it with regard to our own situation. So maybe someone from MSRS could, one of their analysts could also come and talk to us about what impact this would have and where people are right now. We'll try and do that. We're going to have this hearing on Tuesday, but it won't be the final discussion, I'll put it that way. And maybe, I think we could still just lay the bill over, and I'll take advice from you offline. Lay the bill over, but not be done with the hearing, so, of the subject. On Tuesday, then, we'll having this, and then, Mr. Bergren, what's in store for Wednesday and Thursday?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wednesday, we are going to be hearing the bill that was introduced today relating to the auditor's TIF changes. And then on Thursday, we are still waiting for one more piece of information, but we would like to confirm Commissioner Markwart.
Okay.
Or move the confirmation to the floor.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
I'm afraid I was not able to hear. What is Tuesday?
Tuesday is public testimony on Senate File 15.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Which leads me to, before we adjourn, I've been speaking with Senator Weber about engaging various members of the tax committee to help review major subject areas that we discuss every year, have provisions for every year, and that we would have at least a Democrat and a Republican, because these are nonpartisan issues totally, or they should be at least. The local sales tax, reviewing the local sales tax, and provisions and proposals that are coming in, and also, as Mr. Bergman just mentioned, tax increment financing. We have the auditor's bill with some tweaks in it from last year that was adopted, and Senator Weber and Senator Klein will, if people want to talk about their bills regarding that issue, they should speak to the two of them, not necessarily to me. The same thing with the sales tax items. I'm going to be asking Senator Housechild and Senator Nelson to work together with Senate Council to make sure that the proposals that come in meet our requirements. What they usually do is make up a chart, but that you all would be reviewing them, if that's okay. And I'm now also in discussion with Senator Weber about identifying other major areas that we're likely to have more than one or two proposals, either that are local in nature or even possibly looking at LGA and CPA. It's a major issue. I know Senator Klein is interested in it, and maybe someone on the Republican side. Senator Weber is going to be talking to his colleagues and see if we can get a lot of that information to us without having to have, a lot of bills, but we have people on the committee that are going to be not responsible for, but gathering information and making recommendations to the committee on a bipartisan basis or nonpartisan, whatever, as to where we should be going with that major program, because we will be doing something with the property aids and credits moving forward, and I don't see it I don't see it as a partisan issue myself, so, just to let you know. Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you mention something about a deadline for local option sales taxes? And
Yes,
if
sir.
so, can you
January 30.
notify us? What is
Well-
the actual, that's when the bills have to be introduced,
No,
or they have to
I'll
let
explain.
revenue know,
And
or?
you're getting a memo.
I'm sending it out today.
Okay, the deadline, it's kind of a funny, not funny, but odd procedure. According to the statutes, it's not our committee, information that is statutorily required must be forwarded to the chair and the minority lead by January 31st. The bills can come later, but the information regarding the resolution, what the things are going to be used for, that information has to be presented to the chair and the lead in both bodies, House and Senate, and then the legislator for that city can work with the city and Senate Council to develop the bill that's needed. The reason why we went to that, and I believe that those requirements came when Senator Chamberlain was a tax chair, is to not have a request come in the day before we are bringing the tax bill to the floor, for example. So the information and it also it's an opportunity if some cities who are less sophisticated, they'll present some information and we can have our nonpartisan staff look at it and say, oops, this is incomplete, gives them a chance to visit with them and make sure that the information is complete and ready to be put into legislation. Now, the memo that Ms. Pollack is sending out will be quoting the statute and so forth for members. I've mentioned it in committee, I also mentioned it on the floor. That is a hard deadline. And just because you've had one passed before, that's irrelevant. If you want something going forward, because a lot of the cities are changing the amounts they want because their costs have risen so high. So what they had before anyway was going to be insufficient. Is that helpful, Senator
It
Miller?
is very helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I suspect that you and Senator Weber and Senate Council will be very busy reviewing all those proposals, because I imagine there are going to be a lot of them coming in.
We receive them and pass them on is what I do.
Madam Chair,
Ms.
just
Pollack.
one point of clarification, which is indicated in the memo that I sent to Mr. Berggren. The requirements that you outlined only apply to local general sales taxes, so that is local sales taxes that apply to the same base as the state sales taxes. That requirement does not apply to special taxes such as, lodging in addition to the statutory 3%, food and beverage, and so forth.
Right, it is a sales tax for like specific projects in a city, but the base is unaffected. I mean, it's the same base.
Correct, Madam Chair.
Right, and that would, if that was not in those proposals, it would be a violation of our streamlined sales tax agreement with 20-some other states. Anything else, any other questions? So look for that memo from Mr. Berggren and pass it on to your cities if they already don't have the information. Okay? All right, so we're going to end this discussion today. We will see you on Tuesday. We're adjourned.